Hello, this is XenoCow, and today I'm going to show you how to design a ship from the very just idea of one all the way up to the end. And at the end of the video, there's a link in the description. You'll be able to download this ship and poke around. There'll be some extra little surprises around the ship if you do that, so please take a look if you want an example of what a completed ship looks like. So let's begin. First step in designing a ship is figuring out what constraints you want to put on the design. So for example, if you have a fighter, it's going to need weapons, and it may need extra armor, and so those are the kind of things. So for example, in this build, I'd like to have a large flat space for all the devices to sit on so that it's easy to demonstrate where they're piped to and how they're organized. I'd also like it to be a useful ship, so I'm including ore crates, and so then whoever uses this ship can mine with it and earn a profit using it, so it's not just a demonstration. So with that in mind, let's get on to the next phase. The next step is actually designing how you want the ship to look, and so what I did, I just used the pencil and paper and drew out 3 different designs. This first one here, I think it's pretty cool looking. It has a flat space for all the stuff they were talking about earlier. It's got a kind of neat design where it's aesthetically pleasing. However, I was a little bit worried about the angles being a little bit difficult for someone to follow along with. The angled beams are somewhat challenging, so I wanted to try another design. Here's something that is interesting. We have this kind of box within a square, and I thought it looked cool, but it didn't really pass the large flat area test. So then I moved on to this next one, which, although it's the least interesting looking of all 3 designs, is what I ended up sticking with. It has flat area, it has room for ore crates, and its design is very simple so that anybody looking at it can understand how it all goes together. Now that we have our design, it's time to start in the Starship Creator. And here, I think that it's best to start with placing the things that you must have and that are going to determine the shape of your ship. So what I do is I'm going to place these ore crates because they are center, or smack in the middle of the ship, and they're going to determine how everything else fits around it. And since I'm not measuring things and I don't remember how big ore crates are, they'll be a helpful guide to figure out everything else around them. So I'll place those down, and I'm going to leave fewer crates in the ship than I originally placed because I want the ship to be cheap, and in order to, if I does ever end up in a shop, and to help with that, I'm going to have just a few crates. If someone wants to add crates later on, you're free to bolt on as many as you'd like, or at least as many fit inside, and it should be easy enough to then upgrade the ship that way. Or you can use the space for whatever, I don't know, something else. But let's just start with the main thing that makes a difference space-wise. This next part is one of the lengthy parts, and it is placing the beams. And we're just going to start and reference our drawing and place beams around until we have the shape that we want, making sure to leave spots for our hardpoints, which we're going to put thrusters on later, and making sure that the beams are meshing with the ore crates in such a way that the crates can bolt onto them and they aren't going to fall off or not be rigid enough. So that's this part. Lots and lots of beams. Some people have different ways that they like to lay out their grid of beams. I don't have a particular pattern that I prefer over other patterns. So whatever works for you, do it. As mentioned in the last section, we need to now place our hardpoints and thrusters. A couple things to note here is that fully built or assembled thrusters can be found in the modules, and there's like a starter set. And that's really helpful just so you can grab the whole thing instead of having to grab each component that builds up a thruster. Another thing to note is that these triangle thrusters can snap to another one, and you only need one of them to be connected to a hardpoint at a time. So we have on this 4 hardpoints for all 8 of our thrusters, so each triangle thruster has only one that's connected to a hardpoint, but that's okay. It's good to have a little bit of redundancy. We could have only had 1 hardpoint and this all would have still worked fine, or actually there's a little bit of a gap, so 2 hardpoints. But it's a good thing to know because sometimes you're a little bit limited in space, how many hardpoints you can fit somewhere. And so feel free to stack a whole bunch of triangle thrusters together. You cannot, however, stack the box thrusters, so keep that in mind. Each box thruster has to have its own hardpoint. This next step is another lengthy one, which is adding plates. And if you're not careful or you have a very complex or large ship, this can end up being a humongous jigsaw puzzle of trying to get everything to fit in properly since you have a limited set of plates. Now, we have a really simple ship here, so big square plates will do just fine. One other nice thing that we have, since this one is a symmetrical across its middle, its belt, then all I have to do is fill in the top path, and then I can grab that whole thing and mirror it to the bottom, or just make a copy and then flip it over. There's no mirror tool yet. Then, so we only have to do half the work here, and feel free to use that. I do that all the time as I'm building, because if I can do something across an axis, I'll do it once and then copy it over. The next thing I wanted to add, since it's kind of related to plates, are the doors. And then on this model I have 2 versions of the doors, one with hinges and one with sliders, just so that you can see examples of both working. And for these sliders, and the hinges actually in particular, they were a little bit difficult to snap into the place I wanted them, and one trick that I use for that is using little plates to give it something to snap to, because sometimes things don't quite have the snap points where you want them to, and so you need to build up with little plates around, almost like a frame, like, I want you to go here, so please stick to this thing here. And so whenever I'm out and about in Starbase or just at the station, if I need to put something down and it's not quite snapping, I always make sure to have a little plate, just like a 12 by 24 plate on hand, in order to help snap things into place, because sometimes, again, they don't want to be where you want them to. Doesn't mean it's the end of the world, you just need a little bit of help. The next thing I want to add is the cockpit, and so that's the pilot seat on its stand, and it has a little control panel that you can attach to the front if you want, and also the various other devices that help with the ship control. So that's the Flight Control Unit, FCU, and the MFC, the Main Flight Computer, as well as a couple of sockets for YOLOL chips. That's the in-game programming language. And also some levers on that control panel in front of the seat so that we can actually control all our thrusters and which direction we want to move in. In addition to that, I also put a couple control panels just to the side of those that lever section, and that'll help us to have some displays and buttons for the various things that we want to know about what's going on inside our ship. After that, we're going to place down our generators, fuel tanks, as well as batteries. And the generators, they come in essentially 3 parts with a couple little extras, or 2 parts with extras. They have a fuel chamber, which is this green tube, and there is the generators themselves, which are orange. And the extra little things they need are some pipe sockets, cable sockets, and radiators, as well as the fuel, what are they called? Fuel cell racks? No, not fuel cell. Coolant cell racks, which the radiators and the coolant cells, they all act to take away the heat from the generator. If the generator doesn't have any cooling, it'll just shut off. No explosions, which you may like or may dislike. In any case, you need cooling or your generator will not run. And the batteries are kind of like a buffer between your generator producing power and the various devices, thrusters, weapons, mining lasers, etc., that use power. So as they use power, they'll draw it from your batteries, and your generator will work to fill up those batteries. If you don't have batteries, you can still power things, but if whatever it is, your power draw exceeds the capacity of the generator, it won't work. So batteries are nice because they can output a ton of energy, but they don't generate anything themselves, so you have to constantly be refreshing them with the generator. And with those placed down, now that's everything placed. We've got all our thrusters, all our devices, all our power and things that maintain our ship. It's time to weld all the beams and bolt all the plates and components. And so after that happens, not everything's going to work. There's a few more steps after that, but what you do want to do right now is start looking to see what isn't durable enough. And to do this, you're going to use the durability tool. The icon for it is a little wrench over a little progress bar. And with this, you can see, with the left mouse button, you can see where things are going to fall off the ship or not, and with the right mouse button, you can see the frame durability. And so, after seeing this, you're going to want to go around, place extra bolts, maybe even change the beam structure in places, and all this just to fix all these little errors. You'll see the little boxes, and so just go around, fix all the errors. Just start at one end of the ship, go to the other, or you can go through one set of devices. Maybe you do want to do all the hardpoints first, or all the plates first. In any case, however you want to do it, just try and go through and fix all the parts. And once you get to a warp level, or warp class that's above 1, you're usually pretty good to go. For some things, you may want to make sure that they're actually really good, like the ore crates. It's really important that they are stuck down. And actually, if you look at the top toolbar, you can see there's something. It looks like a little green weight, and that you can add virtual weight. And you can add virtual weight to your ore crates, and if you do it all the way to the maximum, then you can see what your ship will behave like once it's full of ore, and the heaviest ore possible. And you may want to do this so that you know that your ship will, no matter what ore you have in it, will still stay in one piece and you'll get to fly. While mining, it is important to still bring a durability tool just in case, so that you don't tear your ship apart. Just trying to get some good old nuggets. Now that you've fixed all the errors, which you may have to go back and fix later as you continue on, but this should be pretty good for now. It's time to start wiring things up, and actually I made a video recently on data and power networks, so feel free to check that out. There should be a little thing showing up in the, I forgot what they're called, cards. Should be a card that shows up. So if you want to learn a little bit more about how those transmit around, feel free to check that out. In any case, you need to wire pretty much everything to everything. Anything that needs electricity, which is all the hardpoints, all your thrusters, the ore crates, your controls, and all the different little cockpit devices, they're all going to need power. And just make sure that you have everything wired up. This takes a bit of time, but eventually you finish, and then everything should be able to talk to each other. It can read the different fuel fields from each other, and yeah, so there's that. Takes a while. You'll get the hang of it. There's some little tricks that you'll learn as you just play with it, because sometimes placing wires can be a little bit tricky. Equally as important as wires are pipes, and pipes, all you need to do for pipes is you need to make sure that your thrusters have pipes going to them from your fuel tanks, and that you have pipes going from your resource bridges to your fuel tanks, and make sure that also your ore crates have pipes going from them to your resource bridges, and they don't really need to be connected to the fuel tanks, but it's easiest to have everything on one network of pipes. Also, really important is your generator pipe socket connecting to the radiators. This way, coolant can flow from the radiators to the generators and vice versa. Now this next part, though it doesn't take very much time, is definitely, I think, something that tricks up the most players. And this is thruster naming. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to select all the thrusters on your ship, and you're going to look in your MFC, and you're going to find all these different things that all say thruster power level 01, 02. And so those names there, those thruster power level, whatever number, those are what you're going to want to take from your MFC and put in the space that says currently on all your thrusters, thruster state. And so again, you're replacing the words thruster state, not the numbers after the end. You don't touch numbers at all, only the words. Thruster state, replace that with thruster power level 01, 02, 03, and so on. And so after you're done with that, your thrusters should be connected to your MFC, and it should be able to then control them. One thing to note is that sometimes if you have too many thrusters that are very near each other and could potentially behave the same way, like in the back we have all these triangle thrusters, you may want to group them as one thruster, and by group I mean name all the thrusters the same thruster power level number. And so what that'll do is it'll tell the MFC to treat all of those thrusters all like one thruster, and that'll save it from confusing itself. And actually when building this ship, I had a problem where on the back, the triangle thrusters, I had them set as 4 different thrusters. So the top was split into 2 and the bottom was split into 2. But it turned out that caused a lot of an oscillation in straight flight. And so what I did is I then changed all the top and all the bottom to be 1 thruster each. So then that fixed all the problems. So if you're having weird wobbliness, maybe it's time to group or ungroup thrusters. Just see if that'll help solve things. Next thing I do is make sure that my doors are now working. And for the hinges, that's pretty easy. You just set them to the button, the same name as the button, and press the button and they open up. For the sliding doors, it's a little bit trickier since they are 2 sliders that operate 1 door. And so I had to play around a little bit with making sure that one slider goes in one direction and the other slider goes in the other direction, so that they both end up moving the door in one direction. But after a little bit of playing around, figured it out, and just make sure that things are going in the right direction. You test all your doors beforehand so that they don't collide with things and shatter when you actually have bought your ship. Next I'm going to add a turtle mode. Now on my own ships I usually call this something like slow mode, because what it does is it just slows your ship down. But on all the developer ships it's all called turtle mode, so that's the standard for what this button is called. And what it does is it's going to set the general multiplier in the FCU to a value. I set it to 30 so that when you press the button, you have the on state of the button set to 30, and that on state is the FCU multiplier. So whenever you press the button, everything that you put in is 30% of what it normally would be. So the ship flies 30% slower, it turns 30% slower, etc., etc. It's handy to have when you're just flying around stations or don't want to crash into asteroids. Next, we're going to add a little bit more functionality, and so I'm going to do that by using a YOLOL chip to add up all the fuel tank values, the generator fuel chamber values, and all the batteries. And I'll just add them all up and then display them to these progress bars beside the controls up for the ship. Now one thing to note is for the batteries, since there are so many batteries and adding them all up, it was required for me to take 2 lines, 2 YOLOL lines, to add them all up, even though the names are only 2 characters long. And so what I did is in the first line I saved the added value to a temporary value, and then in the next line I was able to finish the whole summation up. If I had summed partially in the first line and then again in the second line, give some weird values, because it would bounce back and forth between half the battery value and the actual battery value. And so try to just, if you can, add all of whatever resource it is up in one line, at least for the final value. The next quality of life thing we're going to add is an AutoGen. So this program will maintain the generator at just the value it needs to be to keep the batteries at full capacity. Now, if you ask anyone on the Discord, you'll find plenty of answers, and they'll just say, you'll ask, hey, can I have a generator script? And they'll say, here you go. I don't use that one. I use a little bit of a different one that I made myself. It's just from my control systems class in college, it's just a constant controller that multiplies the error between whatever your full batteries are and whatever you actually have the battery set to by 1,000. And so if you are not doing anything and batteries are full, it'll be off. If it goes a little bit below, the batteries will ramp up until, I don't know exactly how much, but it'll ramp up more than it needs to in order to fill up the batteries quicker. So it usually can respond fairly quickly to sudden power needs, and I like it. All you just to do to find whatever, there's this one divisor you need, and it's just, you just divide whatever your maximum battery capacity by 1,000 and you get that divisor. So I like it. I left one of the ones that I found on Discord on there as well, so if you want to use that script instead of mine, feel free to. You just comment out mine and it should just work just fine. And with that, our ship is done. So after downloading it, if you want, from the description, you're going to take that file and you're going to put it in this folder. So you're going to go to User, App Data, Roaming, Starbase, SSC, Autosave, Ship Blueprints. Stick it in there. Then, when you go to the SSC, you're going to go to File, Open Blueprints, or Open and Manage Blueprints. And at the top there should be Autosaves. You're going to click on that and you're going to scroll around through all those numbers until you find one that's blank. And that blank one should be this ship. You click on that, it will open up. Then just go to, again, File, Save As, name it whatever you please, and then the ship is yours. And you're free to buy it. You can mess around and edit it. And on the version that I'll be sharing, there's going to be all sorts of little annotations all over the ship so you can learn about all the different devices and how they all function there. So please feel free to download it and take a look around. And that being said, that's all I've got. So thank you very much for watching. Dislike the video while you still can. YouTube's planning on getting rid of dislikes, so do it now. Unsubscribe. And this was XenoCow signing off.